Hi boys and girls, Miss Reichert here. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 14 from our Read Aloud Rump, Rump to the Rescue. It was afternoon when we reached my cottage. Red stood by me and finally spoke her mind. "You're going to go, aren't you? To help Opal." It wasn't a question really, and the declaration cleared my own doubt. I had to go. Red let out a heavy sigh. Her brow was knit and her mouth curved down, but she didn't look angry. Was she sad? I'd never seen Red sad. That's when I realized that even if she did call me an idiot, Red really cared what happened to me. She was my one true friend. "Will you take care of Milk for me? She gives some milk still." She nodded. "What about your donkey?" "I'm taking him with me." I didn't want to burden Red too much, and even though nothing was ornery and stubborn, he might be able to carry me, or my things, if I could get him to move. "How will you find Opal?" Red asked. I shrugged. "What if she's locked up?" I shrugged. "What if you get caught and shot with an arrow or poisoned or—" "Then I'll be dead, Red." I smiled because of the rhyme, even though it wasn't a happy one. Red gave me one of her rare smiles. "You're an idiot, Rump, but the smartest idiot I know." I put my hands in my pockets, pulled out the seed Red's granny had given me, and held it up to the sun. I thought how the odds were stacked against both of the little seed and me. A boy all tangled in life and magic. We didn't have a chance. Really, but sometimes you still have to try. "Little things can grow big," I said. "Under the right circumstances," said Red, and she bent down and dug up some old cold earth. I placed the little seed in the hole, and we covered it up. Red left after. I stuffed just a few things in my satchel, a dry loaf of bread, some biscuits, a skin of water, and my mother's bobbin from her spinning wheel. I knew that it wasn't the reason for the magic, but I wanted it with me. A little piece of my mother. A piece of home. I wish I could take a piece of Gran with me too, but there was nothing I would have to carry a memory. It was late afternoon when I walked through the village, toward the road that led down the mountain. I stopped once I looked back on the village. I'd never seen it from this view. The houses were stacked in jumbled clusters of the mountainside, some so lopsided they looked like they might slide right down. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and the windows were lit with candles. The mill stood above all the houses, the biggest building by far. High above the village were mines that I had worked in my whole life. I had never been anywhere but this village, even though I knew there were only other kingdoms and the villages and probably mountains all over the world. This had always been my world. I imagined my mother leaving yonder and feeling the same. In my mind, I thought I would not be gone for very long, but in my heart, I felt like I was leaving on a great expedition. And if I ever returned, it would be very different. I hoped it would be different. I was leaving the mountain at last. True, my leaving might have sounded far grander if I were leaving a place with a real name, like Shurtliff or Asteria, but I left just the same. It all sounded so big and adventurous, but my lofty sentiments were squashed before I had gotten even halfway down the mountain. Nothing didn't carry a thing. Instead, I hauled him up. It was about as fun as playing with pixies. When I tried to ride him, he either wouldn't move or moved so fast I couldn't hold on. Then he stumbled, and I fell off. I ended up pulling him the whole way while he bellowed and spit in my ear. When I finally reached the bottom of the mountain, it was night. Luckily, there was little moonlight, or I wouldn't have been able to see at all. I met a man driving a wagon and asked him how far it was to the kingdom and what direction. He pointed in the direction I was already going and said it was a good 12 miles. My heart sank. "I would gladly give you a ride in my cart," said the man, "but your donkey doesn't look like he'd keep up with the horse." "No," I said, "he wouldn't. I wanted to kick nothing. Maybe I could just tie him up here and get a ride anyway. But then someone might steal him. Worthless as he was still my only companion that I had on this journey." I gave another tug and we plodded down the road. After an hour, I was starving, so I ate all the biscuits in my sack. We found a stream to drink from and some early spring grass for nothing. After that, he settled right down in the grass and didn't want to move. I pulled and pulled, but he just bellowed. I got on his back and kicked him as hard as I could with both legs. He still didn't move. I pulled out my mother's bobbin and poked his side with it. He bellowed and jumped right up and started trotting down the path, with me hanging on his side. Nothing carried me for only a few miles before I had to start pulling him again. And after another hour, I wondered if the man with the cart had been mistaken, and it really was 20 miles, even 30. I had no sense for distance. Maybe I wouldn't get there by tonight, and something really awful would happen in the morning. What would the king do to Opal and her family if she didn't spin the straw into gold? How could I go back home if I failed? The road widened and small horses started to appear. Their windows all dark and quiet. It must have been very late, but the houses gave me hope, and I was close to the king's city. The houses got closer together and smaller, and then very close and stacked on top of each other. They looked like towers made of rubble that the wind might blow over. Then they spread out a little and got bigger, a lot bigger. The road began to wind and curve up a steep hill, and at the top was a giant stone wall. Beyond that wall was King Barf's castle. Opal was there. Nothing would knock up the hill. It was almost as steep as the mountain, and no matter how much I poked and jerked and kicked, he wouldn't budge. So I reasoned that if he wouldn't budge for me, he wouldn't budge for anyone else either. I left him on the side of the road by a tree, and I hoped the swarm of pixies would bite his bony, stubborn rump. Halfway up the hill, my courage started to drain with my energy. In all the excitement of being a hero, I hadn't thought any of this through. When I started my journey, it was as if all the obstacles in my way weren't really obstacles at all, just minor annoyances. But when I reached the top of the hill, I realized that they were definitely obstacles, and big ones. The castle was surrounded by towering walls with closed gates and soldiers guarding those gates, with spears and bows and arrows. Would I be a coward if I went back down the hill? What would Gran do? It was a silly question. Gran would never have gotten into this mess in the first place. Oh, how I wished I could talk to her now. I needed to think. I thought about what was in my way and what I had to do to get it out of my way. I needed to get Opal in the castle, but in there was the guards and spears and arrows and a stone wall and possibly more of that beyond the wall. What did I have? An ornery donkey stuck at the bottom of the hill and a dry loaf of bread and an old bobbin. And one more thing, at that very moment, a miracle happened. A horse and a cart came up the hill, and the driver hopped down to speak with the guards. "Straw deliveries go to the stables," said one of the guards on the other side of the castle. "This sir straw ain't for no stables. This is for a chamber. Had an order for it to be brought this way. Tonight, I've got a letter." Straw for the chamber? That had to be for Opal. The guard looked down at the letter and the man was holding out. While they spoke, I crept to the back of the cart, unseen by the guards or the driver. I pulled myself up and dug myself into the straw until I was completely hidden. In a moment, I heard the gate squeak open and the cart rolled forward. I almost laughed. The cart assembled on for a minute, but then stopped, and I heard the driver unhitch the mule. The driver spoke, with probably more guards, and then I was pretty sure we were on the inside of the castle because everything started to echo. The straw was scratching at my arms and neck and everywhere. I struggled to remain still, and the itchy stirred up from an uncomfortable memory, also involving straw. It had happened a few years ago. I was hiding from Frederick and Bruno in the barn behind the huge sack of straw. They were mad at me because I had sneezed really loudly in the middle of their older brother's wedding, right at the quiet part. So Frederick and Bruno were chasing after me, trying to light my pants on fire. I guess I should have realized that a haystack is not a smart place to hide when you're running from fire. The whole barn burned down, and I barely made it out alive. Needless to say, my pants did catch on fire. The memory made me shudder. I suddenly wondered that I jumped into this pile of straw so readily. Finally, the cart stopped and the man knocked on a door. A few muffled exchanges. I heard a woman's voice. Opal's, maybe. Suddenly, I was tumbling out of the cart, rolling in the straw as it came down. The straw still covered me on the floor, and I heard a cart trundle away as the door shut. I was just about to peek when I felt hands digging into the straw and pulling out big clumps. I froze, and then someone grabbed my hair and yanked. I yelped and flapped out of the straw, hitting my head on the floor with a loud crack. "Oh!" said a voice. I looked up and saw a woman standing over me, but it was not Opal. The woman had a feather duster and a rag tucked into her skirt. She was older, but tried to hide it with lots of rouge on her cheeks and lips. She was holding a big piece